18 years, all by yourself on a deserted island. No one knows you're there, and there's definitely no one coming to save you. It was just the beach, the water, and one woman left to survive by herself for 18 long years. San Nicolas Island off the coast of California. San Nicolas is part of the group of islands called the Channel Islands, about 61 miles or 98 kilometers from the coast. It's currently controlled by the U.S. Navy to serve as a weapons testing and training facility. But back in 1835, it wasn't that at all. Instead, it was the home of the Nicoleño Native American tribe. The island was first recorded by Spanish explorer Sebastián Vizcaíno when he spotted the island on the feast day of St. Nicholas on December 6, 1602. However, during the expedition of Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, the island was first spotted but not officially recorded in 1543. The natives on the island were the Nicoleño people, who were most likely related to the Tongva native group that occupied the California mainland and Santa Catalina Island at the time. Experts of archaeology can prove that San Nicolas was occupied by humans for at least 10,000 years. In 1814, a group of Russian fur traders from Russian Alaska came to San Nicolas in search of sea otter and seal. When they arrived to the island, they wanted to establish trade relations with the Nicoleño people, but the natives already had trade agreements with the other tribes on the neighboring islands. The native Nicoleño also did not like having foreigners on their land, and reportedly killed one of the Russian hunters. This angered the Russians, and in retaliation decided to slaughter the entire population. They continued their destruction by exploiting the island's natural resources. By the 1830s, less than 20 survivors remained on the island. This left the Nicoleños vulnerable, and with little resources. Word spread of the attack by the Russians, and it eventually spread to the California mainland. When the Mission Santa Barbara heard about the massacre, they put together a rescue mission in late 1835. They saw the opportunity and sent a ship out to the island in order to bring any survivors back to the mainland. Captain Charles Hubbard and his crew set sail for the Channel Islands in search of survivors and any remaining island resources. When they docked, they found all of the remains of the Nicoleño people. They also found the survivors from the attack. Most of them boarded the ship, and just as the ship was ready to leave, they realized that one woman was missing from the ship. Due to a storm rising in the distance and heavy rain already pouring, the ship could not wait to find her and bring her aboard. The ship had to leave in order to make sure the survivors had a chance to make it back to the mainland. Hubbard tried to go back for the lone woman later, but he received orders to deliver lumber to Monterey. And then shortly after, the boat hit a heavy board in the San Francisco Bay and sank. So the lone woman was abandoned on the island and forgotten about for years to come. However, there are other theories floating around. Some believe that the lone woman stayed behind on purpose and did not want to engage with the rescuers at all. She did not trust the rescuers and thought they were kidnapping her people from their home. So instead of letting herself become discovered when the rescuers arrived on the island, she hid in the bushes and observed from afar. Another theory is that the lone woman did board the ship. When the rescuers came to the island, she joined the group together on the ship, knowing that she was going to be rescued off the island. But after she learned that her son was not on the ship, she jumped off to stay with him. Some researchers believe that this theory was completely made up to bring interest to the story. But maybe the lone woman was not native to San Nicolas in the first place. There were different tribes on the other different islands in the Channel Island chain, and perhaps after learning that San Nicolas was abandoned, she traveled there from another island to find a quiet place to live. Maybe she wasn't even from the surrounding islands, and she ventured there from the mainland after learning about the island's availability. Maybe she traveled there without knowing about the massacre, and after discovering the island's abandonment, decided to stay in order to live in a peaceful location. The most reasonable suggestion, however, is that due to the storm brewing during the day of the rescue, the island wasn't properly searched. There was heavy wind and strong rain showers that day, so the crew couldn't search the entire island. In order to guarantee their survival, the rescuers quickly came to and left the island and did not even find the lone woman in the first place. With no official record of the lone woman's abandonment due to the sinking of Captain Charles Hubbard's ship, it took almost 20 years for anyone to learn of her existence. The rumors of someone living in San Nicolas Island spread among the Channel Islands, and it eventually made its way to the California mainland. Father Gonzalez of the Mission Santa Barbara paid an explorer who specialized in hunting seals to find the lone woman, but he was unsuccessful in 1850. When the explorer returned to San Francisco, Captain George Nidiver was fascinated by the story, so he set up his own expeditions with his own seal hunting crew to search for the lone woman. He was unsuccessful twice before 1853, but then on the third adventure, one of Nidiver's men made a world-changing discovery. Captain George Nidiver and his crew had set foot on San Nicolas Island previously, but never found any new signs of the Nicoleño people. Then one of Nidiver's men, Carl Dittman, discovered human footprints on the sands of the beach. This was alarming to the crew, but not because they were human footprints. It was because the hunting expedition crew all had on boots. They followed the footprints along the beach and discovered pieces of seal blubber left out to dry. The footprints led them further down the beach line towards a cave and an unfinished haphazard hut made out of whale bones. That's where they saw her, the lone woman. The lone woman was dressed in a skirt made of animal skins and large bird feathers. It was put together with the tendons of a seal. It was actually her only dress. It sat high on her shoulders and went down to about her knees. She was busy preparing seal meat for her next meal when they found her, and she appeared to be around 50 years old, although her age was never confirmed. She had long brown hair that looked almost burnt due to most likely prolonged sun exposure. She is described to have large, full eyes and a low, broad forehead. She stood with a medium build and looked masculine in appearance. She had a hooked nose that was formed finely, and she had her full set of teeth. However, they were worn down almost completely, most likely due to eating tough meats for so long, like whale and seal meat. She had a larger mouth than normal, with a protruding lower lip and set chin. Despite all her features, her old age still showed. She used her resources well for what she had, constructing a hut out of whale bones and other materials on the island. She even kept track of her time on the island, using notches with a stick. She was intelligent and creative. She crafted her own tools such as needles, materials to sew, baskets, water vessels/containers, and even a blade made out of an old knife. Although she was previously described as reserved and uncommunicative to foreigners, she seemed happy to see the hunting expedition. Captain Nidiver had a member of his crew who was Native American attempt to communicate with the lone woman, but he couldn't understand her. She sang him a song, and although he couldn't understand it, he memorized it. It was later translated loosely, and the main statement from the song was, "I leave contented, because I see the day when I want to get out of his island." It had been so long since she had seen another person, it seemed like maybe she did want to leave the island. She actually spent some time, weeks researchers say, showing the crew what she did on the island. She showed them her daily routines, all of her tools and resources, and showed them how she hunted. Due to her isolation, after showing them how she lived on the island, she felt the connection between her and the crew, and decided to leave her routine life to find out what was on the other side. Some stories said that the lone woman left behind all her belongings, and some stories say that she brought 20 pounds of seal fat with her. Seal fat smells awful, yet she loved it. It is what kept her alive for so many years, after all. After little convincing, she willingly went with Captain Nidiver and his men back to the mainland after 18 long years, being by herself on the island. Captain Nidiver was from Santa Barbara, where he lived at home with his wife, Maria, who was Spanish. He brought the lone woman back home, where the two women would get along despite their language barrier. Many natives came to attempt to communicate and understand the lone woman, but it was almost as if her language was made up. That was because the Nicoleño language was just as unique as its people, But since there were no more Nicoleño people left, no one could quite understand the lone woman. Even though she was not understood, people still listened to her. She became adored in the town that she lived, as her kind heart touched those she was around. She spent a lot of time on Captain Nidiver's back porch, where she could look out to the sea, maybe looking towards the island she once inhabited. She had many visitors, including other natives in the area, such as the Chumash people. The Chumash were a native tribe that traded with the Nicoleño back during their existence, but they still could not speak or understand each other fully. They brought her fruits as gifts and tried their best to connect with her. The lone woman loved horses and was fascinated by the new world she was in around Santa Barbara. Despite this, it was still difficult for her to convey herself to the people in the town. Ever since her discovery, she would mainly communicate with hand gestures, since her words were never understood. She did not follow the typical rules of the town and did not conform to their customs. She sang her own songs and sang whenever she felt like it. The townsfolk didn't get upset by this. Instead, they looked at her with fascination. The people of Santa Barbara were very surprised at the lone woman's transition to the city life. Typical natives in the area who came from their native islands didn't accustom well to the life on the mainland because they were so used to their life on the island. She spent a lot of time with the priests on the island. They also could not understand her. She tried using signs and symbols to describe her time on the island, but it didn't help that much. But they did make her new foods to try. She enjoyed all the new tastes and textures as she wasn't used to any of them. She participated in many dancing events, using her sense of rhythm as a universal language when spoken word failed. She tried to teach them her songs and learn theirs. She was fascinated by the European-style clothing, as she only brought the one gown made of feathers that she had on the island. The townsfolk fell in love with the lone woman, being intrigued by her wild nature and different perspective on life. But her time in California wouldn't last long. The lone woman spent 18 years eating whale meat and seal fat, grinding down her teeth to the gum. She spent 18 years under the hot San Nicolas sun, being surrounded by ocean water. A sudden change in her environment was good at first, but it was only a temporary change. Just 7 weeks after she first arrived on the mainland, she developed dysentery and died. Dysentery is a highly contagious intestinal infection, and back in the 1800s, doctors didn't know how to properly treat it. They tried using turpentine or castor oil, but those actually made the problem worse. So, without a cure, when the lone woman caught dysentery, just as soon as she arrived to the mainland of California, she left it. Juana Maria passed away on October 19, 1853. Before she passed, the priests wanted to integrate her into their community even further, so they baptized her Catholic and gave her a name in the process, Juana Maria. The priests buried her in front of the Santa Barbara Mission in an unmarked grave. Her body remains there to this day. Many researchers suggested that Juana Maria was completely unable to communicate with any natives in the area. But new research shows that she was able to communicate, even minimally, with at least 3 or 4 different native tribes. This is how we learned the truth behind the lone woman's time on San Nicolas Island. In order to survive, she did what she had to. She killed wild seals and ducks for food. She found washed-up whale bones and used them as shelter. She sewed, fished, and foraged for resources and lived on seal fat. For being in complete isolation for years, she lived as civilly as possible, even having a daily routine and working to survive through sheer determination. She sang songs to keep herself entertained, but these were probably the last notes of the true Nicoleño language. It has also become known that Juana Maria was the last known Nicoleño, since she was the last of her race to be able to communicate and express. However, a study in 2016 has traced at least 4 other Nicoleños migrating to Los Angeles in 1835. It is unclear if they knew of Juana Maria, and if they attempted to make contact with her since they were much further away. One of them was baptized in their local area and named Thomas at 5 years old. He later married and had a son, and lived at least 8 years after Juana Maria arrived in Santa Barbara. Although there is some evidence of other Nicoleños that survived past Juana Maria, it is most likely that she was the last remaining native speaker of the Nicoleño language at the time of her unfortunate passing. In 1939, Arthur Woodward stumbled upon the remnants of a mysterious whalebone structure attributed to the lone woman. Fast forward to 2009, and archaeologist John Erlandson from the University of Oregon made a thrilling discovery. Erlandson, along with his team, found 2 Nicoleño redwood boxes eroding from a sea cliff marked by a whale rib. This find set off an intense and meticulous excavation process on San Nicolas Island, revealing around 200 artifacts, some of which were Euro-American and Native Alaskan in origin. The artifacts uncovered from these boxes hinted at a period between AD 1815 and 1853, sparking the exciting possibility that these items may have belonged to the lone woman herself. The discovery added another layer to her enigmatic story, blending traces of her life with historical artifacts from different cultures. The team, including Renee Vellanoeth, Lisa Thomas Barnett, and Troy Davis, carefully gathered and studied each piece, trying to piece together the daily life and survival tactics of the lone woman on this isolated island. Then in 2012, the mystery deepened when a U.S. Navy archaeologist reported finding what might be Juana Maria's cave. This discovery brought new information to the ongoing story of the lone woman, as researchers continued to uncover clues about her life on San Nicolas Island. Every new find stirred up more questions and theories, painting a vivid picture of her life on the island. Over the years, 469 human remains and 436 burial objects have been uncovered on San Nicolas Island. An island that was once home to tens of thousands of Nicoleños, then a place the lone woman called home for 18 years by herself, was now one of the most famous islands in the world, and will forever be the home of Juana Maria.